for me, never seeing a tornado, it was shocking. What I seen was evil. It was terrible.
To this day, if there's a thunderstorm, I'm out looking. If I'm sleeping, I wake up. Uh, it's just things that stay with you. Probably isn't anything in my life that ever stuck out more than this does. I can sit here and talk about it. It's like it happened yesterday.
That boundary over lower Michigan really set the stage for rotating thunderstorms and potential of tornadoes. And then we had the rush of warm, moist, unstable air, very classic setup. And because we had that warm front over the area, and we had that kind of east-southeast flow at the surface, turning with height to a strong westerly flow at 20,000 feet, which is the classic tornado setup. And the timing was just perfect, with the morning thunderstorms being over with pretty early in the morning, enough time to recover for when the big piece of upper level energy came in, with peak heating of the day, with a cold front approaching, overtaking that warm front. It really was just sort of the perfect setup, and we don't get that in Michigan very often. And so with that setup, it led to those rotating thunderstorms, and just the right amount of moisture to have low cloud heights, and allow that rotation to penetrate all the way to the ground as those violent tornadoes.
My name is Paul Steinhauser. This happened 70 years ago, and I was 14 years old. I just turned 14. I was born in May, and it was the 8th of June, so I just turned 14.
Yeah, my name is Dale Bonneville, and I was in the 1953 June 8th tornado well, they call it Flint, Michigan. It was actually a suburb called Beecher, is where it actually hit. That day was a very warm day, I remember. Sun was bright. It was hot. It got very hot. And as evening approached, there was a thunderstorm that was approaching our area. We could see it coming. Didn't really pay any attention to it. My father and I was out throwing a ball back and forth in the driveway, and it got to lightning and thunder, and so we went in the house. And as we were going to turn on the TV and watch something, but the lightning was cutting the TV out so bad that we turned it off.
Gloria Panett, and I'll start out with we lived in the city of Montmorris, in the city limits, a block off of Main Street. And my parents had left that day to take care of business in Flint. And I was home with my 5 siblings. The 2 oldest were in high school at the time.
And I was at home with my family. And that day, I remember the weather was real warm, almost hot. And we had my aunt and uncle over for supper. And in the afternoon, it was real humid. And we started hearing a rumbling off to the east. We didn't pay much attention to it. That was probably around 5 o'clock or something like that.
Flint is a small Midwestern town located in southeast Lower Michigan, about 60 miles northwest of Detroit in Genesee County.
Flint is where GM was founded. It's where the UAW union was founded. It was strictly a car town. That's all there was to it. And then as things went on, Flint used to be a wonderful place to live. It was just a nice town. It was a pretty good sized town, but it had very nice places.
In 1953, Flint, Michigan was a thriving Midwestern city known for its strong ties in the automotive industry. As a major hub for General Motors, it was home to thousands of auto workers whose labor powered the post-war economic boom in the United States. The city was also home to many veterans returning from World War II, looking to build stable lives for their families, as well as farmers in the surrounding rural areas who contributed to the local economy. Flint's neighborhoods were close-knit, its downtown lively, its future seemed bright. with a strong sense of community and pride in its hard work. However, things were about to change.
Again, with the history of the Weather Service, it's formed in 1870 as the Army Signal Corps. Great Lakes had a huge part in that. We were losing ships in the Great Lakes back in the mid-1800s, and it was decided that there needed to be a way to report the weather so that ships would know what was coming towards them to try to save those ships on the Great Lakes. So that was a large part of it. And so the Signal Corps started, which was observing the weather. It did eventually turn into the Weather Bureau, and under the Department of Agriculture.
On this day, the Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C. was monitoring unusual weather conditions making their way into lower Michigan that could cause trouble later that day.
As the afternoon went on, it got more humid, and the rumbling kept it up. It was far off in the distance, kept coming up. But we noticed that as this slow rumbling went on, we started talking about tornadoes. My aunt had been in the biggest tornado in the South at that time. It stayed on the ground for like 5 hours. It went through 3 states and it tore her house up. And so she was starting to talk about it and about that tornado. And we started getting pretty worked up because we couldn't get a weather report around about it. But she got us, kind of worried some, And what happened was, as this rumbling went on, there was less and less noise. There was no birds anywhere chirping anymore. You couldn't hear a rumbling of traffic or cars. It just seemed like people could sense that a mysterious calm had went over our area.
And then the storm approached. And the one thing I remember my father saying was, "This is very strange." He says, "We are getting a lot of lightning, a lot of thunder, but we're not getting any rain." And well, yeah, that is kind of strange. And it was kicking up pretty good. And as the storm went on, we kept getting it. And my dad mentioned something about you could see through our house from the north to the south, but you couldn't see from the west to the east, and that's where the storm was coming from. And he mentioned something about, he says, "Look out to the north how black the sky is." And when you look to the south, there was this beautiful, like a big orange thunderhead where the sun was shining on it, I guess. And we made mention about, how drastic change that was from one side to the other.
So we was kind of worked up, and we was all sitting out on the front porch enjoying the weather was just exceptionally nice, because it had been all spring, and now all of a sudden it was real nice and warm.
And then all of a sudden there was this one crack of thunder that was just ungodly. And shortly thereafter, the fire siren started to blow. So we found out later what happened was that the lightning from that crack of thunder set the house on fire down on the corner, which really wouldn't have made any difference because the storm blew it away anyway. So as the fire siren blew, and then it didn't blow long enough. You get used to hearing a siren; it'll blow so many times and then it stops. Well, this one didn't blow that long, and at the same time the siren quit blowing, the light we had on in the living room went off. And my mother said, "Oh, we've lost power," which was right. We didn't have any power. According to the clock on the wall, the power went off at 8:33 that evening. and it was still banging, lightning, thunder, cracking, and all of a sudden it stopped. It was dead silent. There was no thunder, there was no lightning, there was no rain, there was no wind. It just absolutely stopped, dead. And that lasted for, oh, maybe a minute. I don't know, it could have been a minute. And all of a sudden, the wind really started to blow. I remember my father saying, "Boy, it's going to be a windy night tonight." I said, yeah, it probably is.
At 7:30 p.m., the United States Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C. issued Severe Weather Bulletin number 27, 1 hour before the F5 tornado struck.
The rumbling started getting worse and it got dark. My aunt went in the house. She was scared. So we all went in there, was calming her down, and my little brother was out in the front yard, and all of a sudden he said, "Hey, Dad, there is a tornado out here." You know, my dad was upset. He went out there, but sure enough, the tornado was there.
And wasn't long, and my parents returned quite quickly. And we heard the car pull in the driveway. And as they came in the house, remember my dad saying that we had to get in the basement, and he said, and I mean now. And so we all headed into the basement, and we stayed there.
And we could see the wedge shape of it. It wasn't down to a small point. It was almost just about straight down there for a while. But where we seen it at, it was off to the west, and it was pretty much where Turnstead's is at, the Dordt Highway and Coldwater Road area. Well, I just watched it there for probably about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden the tornado right straight out in front of us stopped. It just stood there spinning, and it was real dark and black, and it's starting getting a little bit dark. And my dad says, "Well, that tornado was either going north away from us, or it's coming right at us." Well, that's when everybody decided to go to the basement. And so I went down there, and I had an idea I'd get underneath the front porch where the water pump was at. And I pulled the curtain back. My aunt was already sitting on it. So I went back upstairs. I wanted to see what in the world was going on. And I wanted to see what it was doing. But by this time, it started getting pretty dark. And I looked up into the clouds at the top of the tornado, and I could see small clouds shooting from all directions, like a tornado was sucking these clouds in and feeding the storm. For me, never seeing a tornado, it was shocking. What I seen was evil. It was terrible. And just a short time after I seen it, either lightning hit it or them high tension wires along the railroad tracks there at Dordt Highway was hit and tore down, and wires up in it. But the whole tornado lit up, and it was flashing way up into the clouds, way above the tornado, and it scared me. It scared me real bad, and I knew how violent it was, and I was in shock, and I started to tear up. I started crying, and my dad said, "What are you crying about, Paul?" I said, "Well, Dad," I said, that thing right there is killing people. You can just tell how terrible the thing looked." And my dad said, no, that's going through the farmland and woods. But you know what? sometimes adults try to fake you out a little bit. I knew better. I could tell in my heart it was hurting people, even killing people.
And I looked across the street out the front door, and there was homes across the street, and they had big trees in the yards, big oak trees and elm trees, and great big things. I looked over there and I said, "Well," I said, "that wind's pretty strong." I said, "Look at them trees across the street." He took one look and he said, "Let's get to the basement right now." So we started for the basement. And I followed him, and I thought Mother was following me, but she went into the bathroom to put the window down or something, which put her in the other end of the house. We got to the basement. By the time we got to the basement, it was very loud. He turned to me and said, "Where's Mother?" I said, "I think she went in the bathroom or something." Well, by that time, you could hardly hear yourself talk. And we got in the corner of the basement, and the next thing I heard was all of the glass breaking in the house. All the windows were shattering and coming in. And just as that got almost finished, the house flew right off the foundation and went right out into the front yard. And so now we're standing in the basement. There's no cover over us. The house is done, sailed out. And it seemed to me I seen it raining sparks for a very short period of time. And after that happened, it got real quiet again.
There are many stories from that day. However, there is one that is nothing shy of a miracle. Sandra was just 9 months old when the tornado struck. Too young to walk, she was in the care of a babysitter along with her 3 siblings, while their parents were away from home. As the skies darkened and the winds picked up, the babysitter, sensing the worsening conditions, quickly gathered the children and ushered them inside. Moments later, the tornado struck. In an instant, the house was consumed by chaos, howling wind, shattering glass, and flying debris. Tragically, the babysitter, who was standing by a window, was killed when the twister struck. Inside the house, Sandra was being cradled in the arms of her older brother. As flying debris flew wildly throughout the air, a large object struck his arm, breaking it and causing him to lose his grip on the infant. In a terrifying moment, Sandra was sucked out of the house by the powerful winds. She was thrown 3 blocks away before being gently sat back down by the storm. Later, in a scene that would seem unbelievable if weren't true, a woman found baby Sandra in the middle of the street, not crawling, but walking. Sandra was then taken to a juvenile home, where she was later reunited by her father. Her sister, though seriously injured with head trauma, was miraculously found alive amidst the debris. She survived, though still lives with complications from that day. Incredibly, all 4 siblings survived the disaster. Their family home was one of many destroyed by the tornado. Despite the physical devastation, the emotional toll lingered even more deeply. Sandra believes her parents never rebuilt the home because the memories of that day were too painful to return to. Today, Sandra lives a quiet life in Michigan. Though decades have passed, she still shares the story of that fateful day, a day of tragedy, resilience, and the miraculous survival of a baby girl swept up in the heart of a tornado.
My dad went upstairs to see how everything was, and he came back into the house, and he told us to stay downstairs for a while.
Real quiet time. Well, then people started hollering and yelling, and Dad didn't know where Mother was, and I said, "She's in the house, I can hear her." And we had no problem getting out of the basement because so much rubble had been blown into it. You could walk right up, right up and right out onto the slab. And we got her out of the house. And then people started gathering, and we started hearing people crying. There were kids laying dead that I played with just a few hours before that. It was a terrible night after that. It was sirens and fires breaking out because all of the gas mains had broke. And anywhere there was a spark, it started a fire. That was going on. They found a woman in the road out in front of our house, and there was a piano on top of her. So the gentleman next door and my father went out and got that off her and made a stretcher.
My dad was a civil worker volunteer because he served in the United States Army during World War II. He had a white helmet and a jacket with red letters saying this was a civil defense. on it. All night you could hear sirens going up and down Door Highway with the sirens blasting. My dad stayed out there. He went out and put his uniform on, and he went out to the Beecher area, Coldwater and Kurtz Avenue, and he worked all night helping the injured and finding people that were trapped in the wreckage. And it was pretty hard on him, but he lasted all night long.
And we went outside, and it was quiet. But then I remember hearing sirens. I could hear screaming and yelling. Couldn't make out any words.
And never really got to see the full force of the damage that was done until the next day. It came up a very bright, sunshiny day. We could walk back down. It was only 5 blocks away. And that is when you really got an idea of what had happened. Everything was destroyed. Everything was gone. My grandmother was killed. She lived on the same road we did, but a little farther west. The only thing we found of hers was a refrigerator door was wrapped in a tree. Didn't find a refrigerator, didn't find anything else. Everything was gone. The house, all the belongings was totally wiped out. They found her in the football field across the street where they found her body. And from that day on, it was just try to get yourself acclimated in the things you got to do and what you have to do. It's left a mark on me all my life. To this day, if there's a thunderstorm, I'm out looking. If I'm sleeping, I wake up. It's just things that stay with you. Probably isn't anything in my life that ever stuck out more than this does. I can sit here and talk about it. It's like it happened yesterday.
Yeah, so in 1953, just the advent of television, so there really wasn't even television in every home. So you had radio, and that was about it. A lot of people, I think, relied on newspaper forecasts for the forecast, so that by the time you develop the forecast, put it in print, and get to folks, it was 12 hours old right off the bat as people were reading the newspaper. So relied on radio. A few people probably had their televisions and could get some information that way. And so while a weather bulletin may have been issued for the forecast of severe weather and tornadoes, very few people probably heard about that unless they happened to have the radio on. There certainly was no alerting features for those radios. So you basically had to have it on to hear about it. Skip ahead 75 years and there's just so much more technology, ways to get information, to get the alerts. We have the emergency alert system, which will trigger alerts on all the radios, commercial radios, over the air broadcast. Our cell phones have the wireless emergency alerts, so if you're in the warning area, your cell phone will go off for that particular tornado warning. But even going back several days leading into the event, the Storm Prediction Center would have had forecast of moderate, maybe a high risk type of event. And we would have been forecasting it and messaging about the hazardous weather maybe up to 5 to 7 days before the event. So there would have been plenty of information, maybe up to a week ahead of time. There would have been a tornado watch. Without a doubt, it would have been what we call a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch. That would have been issued 2 to 6 hours ahead of the event. And then we would have been able to issue an actual tornado warning that would have triggered all those alarms. And I should mention that the local county and cities have their tornado sirens. So if you're outdoors in a park, you're doing outdoor recreational activities, you would have heard the sirens as well. And so we would have issued that tornado warning on a classic tornado set up like this, probably 10 to 20 minutes before the tornado touched down, providing 10 to 20 minutes for everyone along the path to get to that place of shelter with tornado warnings, cell phones triggering, sirens going off if you're outdoors, radio and television probably doing wall-to-wall coverage of the event. And since it would have been such a significant and obvious tornado-producing thunderstorm. So it's just a completely different way to get the information out. Yeah, so our local office here in White Lake, which is also known as the Detroit Pontiac Weather Service office, this was part of the modernization of the Weather Service in the late 80s into the 90s with the advent of the Doppler radar. So the Doppler radar site is here covering all of Southeast Michigan. Part of the reason why the Doppler radar site is here is it provides good coverage of Southeast Michigan, but it's also within 30 miles of Selfridge Air National Guard Base. So we provide radar data to help with the National Guard's operations. And then when we modernized the Weather Service from a statewide forecast office and several local warning offices, it ended up being a merger of the Ann Arbor Forecast Office with the Detroit Warning Office and the Flint Warning Office all into this one office. So that happened in between the years of 1992 and 1994. And so by the end of 1994, we were a fully operational weather forecast office with warning operations, forecast operations, and we were spinning down the operations at the Flint and Detroit specific office. Now we're still maintaining, to this day, maintain an observation foothold over the Metro Airport and Flint-Beecher Airport. So we're still doing the observations there through an automated system and some weather observers as well. But so operations continue there as far as observing the weather, but all the warning and forecast operations have been happening here at our White Lake office since 1994.
This world that was my surroundings, my heart screamed out for more. It's the storm inside that's breaking my heart each morning while it keeps it going.